Good evening and welcome back to the One Celtic Fans View this evening. I hope it finds you all well. We've got some big news this evening. We're going to be talking about Good evening and welcome back to the One Celtic. Going to be talking about a few things this evening. I'm going to swap back to that mic. Better. Going to be talking about a few things this evening. I'm going to swap back to that mic. Anyway, now that I've done that, because what I want to do is talking about a few things this evening. Let me just check. Right, there is one thing I want you to listen to this evening, because Celtic have been getting slated. Absolutely slated. Open widget. Stream health. If we listen to this, it's going to let you hear this first of all, because we'll get the funny part out the way first.
They have a good head coach. They are now starting to be able to build again. But effectively, really, for this century, for most of this century, Rangers has been a shit show. Okay. So during that time, Celtic has dominated.
Yep, Celtic have dominated. We know that. Celtic have dominated, and they've dominated Scottish football quite a lot. If we listen to this, has to be said. There's an error. Well, Hoopsaholic, wait till you hear this, because this is him talking. He absolutely slates the board. Listen to this.
Also that of Celtic. So effectively every season was, right, well, Celtic are going to win the league by 15 to 20 to 25 points. This is when Rangers were out of the league. And various other clubs are then going to fight amongst each other for who comes second, third and fourth, and who therefore gets access to the European places.
And that's the key, isn't it? You mentioned revenue there. I mean, the reason they haven't been able to compete is because Celtic have been so dominant commercially. And you're looking at revenues last year, and it's also important.
Celtic, unusually for a football club, make a profit every year. Right, so what they do is they make a profit of 5, 10, 15, 20 million, and then they stick it in the bank. So they've now got a cash balance, I believe, of around about 90 million pounds sat there in the bank. Just put their revenues in perspective, 150 odd million. Bearing in mind they don't get any English Premier League TV revenues. The TV revenues in Scotland are tiny.
So reported figures are about 4 million if you win.
Right.
The SPL.
Right.
Do you remember when we were talking about rugby last week? That's about the same as
about the same as rugby.
So their total media deal is about 35 to 40 million a year for the league.
Charlie, what that tells you is that Celtic's native revenues, i.e. the ones that are not to do with TV revenue, are massive.
Yeah.
I mean...
And we all know that. We know that the money that Celtic are making out with TV is money from the fans. 32 million in revenue for merchandise. It's unbelievable.
That there are Premier League clubs that don't do a lot more revenue than that with the TV deal, with the Premier League TV deal. If Celtic had the EPL deal, and then if they had the additional commercial sponsorships that would come off the back of being in the EPL.
They'd be doing 300 million a year.
More, 350 million, 400 million a year. So they would be in that top echelon of English, absolute minimum. Yeah. Right? So Celtic is huge. One of the biggest clubs in the world. 53,000 season ticket holders and around 10,000 strong waiting list.
And that's in about
Allegedly.
60,000 capacity, correct?
And it's a 60,000 capacity
so it's like
stadium.
90% of your stadium.
We have got...
Unbelievable. That's basically breaking down everything that we know about Celtic as fans. But it's interesting to hear someone with outside Scottish football looking in and talking about the financial disparity between Celtic and the other clubs within the SPFL. Now, we don't worry about that. We don't care less about the disparity between the clubs in the SPFL. But what we do care about is the product on the pitch. Why are Celtic, hiding so much money away? I mean, you'll get Rangers fans that will come out and say that, it's to pay this, that, and the next thing. But anyway, when you look at it, listen to this.
1990s. He was the owner, I think, from around about 1994 to about 1999, something like that. And during that period, Parkhead, Celtic Park, got transformed into what by the standards of then was a modern stadium. Up until then, it had been typical old crumbling terraces and all this type of stuff. In the 80s, it was famously run by a board that was nicknamed the biscuit tin board, because they used to hide all the receipts and petty cash in biscuit tins. That's how tin pot the whole thing was. Fergus McCann came in, he modernised it, and he sort of coagulated the shareholding, manoeuvred the shareholding with the assistance of a guy called David Lowe. Now, just keep that name in your head. Celtic fan from a finance background. At that point, a young man helping Fergus McCann organise the club to enable it to become a modern club, even with it being a listed entity. So Fergus McCann was one of many shareholders. He was not the owner in a way that English football would understand.
Fergus McCann's ambition to take it public was to raise money to avoid potential bankruptcy. Is that correct?
That's right, exactly right. That's when he took over. Right. So at that point,
to save the club,
it's crucial, because at that point, loads of Celtic fans bought shares.
Yep, we all know that. We all remember buying shares back in the time, going to Celtic Park. One of it goes on, and he basically does slate the club. I'm trying to find out let's get into this next bit, where he talks on about the modern day, up to date, where the club and where the financing of the club and the ownership of the club. This is where it gets interesting.
A large chunk of the shareholding is in the hands of Celtic fans. And as the years go by, many of those Celtic fans either pass on or lose interest in the details of their shareholding. It's something which they put a share certificate on their wall, whatever it might be, and they are not actively participating fans.
Yep.
So Dermot Desmond's
Well, they're participating fans. They don't participate in the actual running of the club, and that's what kind of Fergus McCann wanted. He wanted, the majority of Celtic fans to own shares in the club and it not to be under the control of one person. And it is under control of one person.
34%. Effectively, because most of the Celtic shareholders are fans who don't turn up to vote at meetings, effectively Dermot Desmond, his 34% gives him some degree of control. It gets him past the 50%, particularly if there are one or two other sort of more significant size shareholders who are behind him. So for the last 20 years, Dermot Desmond has effectively controlled Celtic despite only owning 34% of it, and also, contrary to other owners in football, not that he is the owner, he's the biggest minority shareholder, of course, he's never put any money into the club. He just owns a shareholding, and the club makes a profit every year. So there's no need for anyone to be putting money in, because the club is simply profitable.
So should we use that as a time?
So Dermot Desmond has not put a single penny of his own money into Celtic over the years.
To basically talk about that complete.
If this doesn't wind you up as Celtic fans, and it'll all come together throughout the video, but when we see what's been going on this season, it's absolutely unbelievable that Dermot Desmond has got away with what he's got away with over the years. Let's listen to a little bit more of this.
So the negativity is normally generated by the fact they're not...
Wait a minute. Because... was that repeating?
...competitive in Europe. So all these years when they've been winning the top division, they've also been failing in the Champions League.
And so the fans are looking at that going, how can this be? Because we have a guaranteed title pretty much every year.
Yeah.
And that is our moment to push ourselves forward.
Yeah.
That's our moment to push ourselves into the environment where we are competing against other top teams at the top table of European football. This year, they didn't even qualify for the Champions League. They didn't even make it to the group stages.
They got beaten in qualifying by what Celtic fans would call a Diddy team.
Well, yeah.
Okay. Now, let's put them in context in terms of their European status. So they are unfortunate in not being in a major European league with big TV revenues.
Top 5 league is a lot of managers and agents like to call it.
Either unfortunate or fortunate. Unfortunate because they don't get the revenues. Fortunate because it means they can win most years. Okay, but mostly unfortunate. It is what a league for them to be in. Let's just pluck out two: Ajax Amsterdam and Benfica. Okay.
Now, this is I'm taking into consideration other clubs in other countries with a similar type of league.
Two other massive, globally relevant clubs with huge histories, all of whom have won the European Champions League or the European Cup, because Celtic, don't forget, won it in the 1960s, won what's now the Champions League in the 1960s. So these are massive, globally relevant clubs in leagues which don't really enable them consistently to compete because of the lack of TV revenue. But Ajax and Benfica do find ways to compete in European competition.
This guy has absolutely ripped to shreds Dermot Desmond and Ross Dermond's thinking of the way that Celtic are run. This is unbelievable.
By hook or by crook, very good academies, buying and selling players well, making sure that you've got your global merchandise operation up and running, making sure that your stadium actually can accommodate all of the people who it needs to accommodate, because you need every penny, because you're not getting the same amount from your TV deals, right? Now, bear in mind this 90 million quid that's sat in the bank. Meanwhile, Ajax and Benfica and Sporting Lisbon and so on, Porto, etc., are spending everything that they've got, mostly pretty responsibly, but they are spending everything they've probably got to try and keep pace with the European top table. And Celtic are putting all their money into their biscuit tin again over here.
And that's the fans' gripe. The fans are looking at this and they're saying...
but they're right. They're totally right. Because unlike in other clubs, I can be quite, I can be quite dismissive of some fans. Well, the owner should spend more money. In this case, they're not asking any owner to spend more money. They're saying the money that we, the fans, generate, we want to see that money put on the pitch or in the stadium. And we'll come on to the stadium in a moment. Because at the moment, we're spending all the money and it's been stuck in a biscuit tin. Why? No.
This is absolutely bonkers. Finally, we're not mad. It's not the fans. This is real professional people talking about the shit show that's going on at Celtic. We've been made to feel we've been made to feel as if we are the issue. The fans are the issue. We've been made as fans to be talked down to by the board. We as fans have been told to toe the line. This guy's just come out and ripped the shreds off of the Celtic board. And he's nothing to do with Scottish football, which is absolutely fantastic. Let's go back to the stadium and hear what he says about the stadium.
Grow the business. Let's go back to the stadium. The main stand at Parkhead is the antiquated one. And there are plans, and it's relatively straightforward to do. I don't know if you've ever been there, but it's it's a big site. I mean, it's not one of those stadiums which is hemmed in on all sides. If you used your 90 million quid in your biscuit tin simply to knock down the main stand, complete the big wraparound, and build a really proper big main stand, your capacity could go from 60,000 up to about 85,000. Could Celtic accommodate 85,000?
Yes.
Absolutely, yes. If Celtic did have 85,000 in every week, would they then start to be able to, like Benfica and Sporting Lisbon, start to push and compete at that very top level? Absolutely, yes. Are there other things they could be doing? Absolutely, yes. Could they be having a small multi-club model where they actually start having another club somewhere on the continent, which they bring players in from Latin America and Africa and cycle them into Scotland to then sell to the bigger market? Absolutely, yes. There are all sorts of things that could be done to enable Celtic to compete at the top table, not actually by risking anything, and simply by using the 90 million quid that's in the bank.
And Charlie, to them,
that's bonkers. We've been told that the stadium redevelopment's too much. We've been told that the hotel was too much and it was not in the Celtic's business interest. We were told that we spent 20 million on Lennoxtown and that kind of, we needed to bank the money. The people that are running the club are getting shown up in public here. It's one of the most explosive interviews that I've heard anyone talking about Celtic. gets even worse for the Celtic directors.
Further, can we bring the wage bill into it? Because we talk about the percentage of wages that, theoretically should be spent, and we've often criticised for overspending. But then when we had Spurs and we talked about where they had maybe fallen short recently,
45%,
45% saying they needed to invest more. Well, this is far worse.
So the gold standard is bear in mind the gold standard of wages to revenue percentage is 50 to 60%. 50% being on the low side, 60% being on the high side. Spurs at 45% are on the low side, but they are paying off a big mortgage on their stadium, and they do spend a lot on transfer fees. Celtic, Charlie, are at
30 million reported figures, and please, these are reported figures of 30 million pounds a year. That is what they spend on their wage bill. Now, remember, revenue was at 143.6 million.
So keep the numbers round, and you're talking about 20%.
The board are taking this. If this doesn't wake up the Celtic fans and the Celtic fan base, I don't think that anything will. It's just unbelievable that, the board have been getting away with what they have been, and the Green Brigade today have come out, and we've still to talk about that yet. But it's just the board have been getting away with absolute murder this season.
Team in the qualifying competition for the European Champions League every season and saying, well, it's because we don't have enough TV revenue, we can't possibly compete.
Or the second bit, we need to keep reserves, because if we don't qualify for Europe, then we don't make our 30-40 million a year. And so they're using it as an excuse to protect that money rather than an excuse to be ambitious.
So I think ambition has become this thing, certainly as with me, it's almost like a swear word, because it's almost code for what your club does and just wazzing cash everywhere for no reason, right? What I'm talking about here is simply responsible stewardship. Responsible stewardship says that if you have room to grow your business and you have available capital, which is currently earning 3% on deposit, you use that money to grow your business because you have a massive waiting list and because you have a huge diaspora of fans who, if you were able to get tickets at Parkhead, the massive numbers of Celtic fans in Boston and Chicago and these types of places who would come. But at the moment, not so easy for them to get a ticket. Yeah. So effectively, this is a farcical way of running a business. So where it has landed...
He's just called out the board and said that the Celtic board are farcical. And it's true what he says. When you look at the dynamics of the Celtic Football Club, when you look at the land mass that we are sitting on, the fact that we can build a hotel. I've seen a fantastic concept, and I meant to take a screenshot of it, of someone actually integrated the hotel into the stand, the new front stand. They integrated the hotel and the museum into the stadium. A guy like this, who has the vision for Celtic, who isn't scared to spend the cash in the right way. He isn't talking about overspending. He's on about just spending it in the correct way. And we're getting outdone as a fan base right now. When you look at it, he's talking about Celtic, he's talking about Fergus McCann at this point.
A group of Celtic's smaller shareholders, led by David Lowe, the guy who helped Fergus McCann 30 years ago sort out the original listing of the business and the recapitalisation of the business. He and another couple of his associates have put together something called Celtic Supporters Limited. And this is basically to start bringing together all the small shareholders into one block so that they can start to effectively enact a boardroom coup, is what we're looking at here. Okay, that's now they're talking about getting to a point where they can have enough to block stuff at board level, so north of 25%. In reality, I think what you're looking at here is to be able to place enough pressure on the Desmond board to effectively enable a takeover of the club.
I was going to say, is this a great opportunity to take a club private, or do you think the risk and the impact of it existing?
I've just had a crazy thought. What if Desmond and co are going to use the money to pay off all the Celtic shareholders, buy their shares, and take it back into being a private limited company again, rather than this is just, we're opening up a can of worms here. A can of worms. And maybe that's what they're holding the cash for. They're going to pay off shareholders. They're going to say, right, there you go. There's a big chunk of cash for your shares. Shut up and go away whilst we retain control of the club. It's absolutely bonkers. He does go on about it. Desmond's stake. He's got it right in for Desmond. I like this guy a lot.
Desmond's stake at some point. Doubtless it'll be at quite a rich valuation by that point. And effectively operate with a balanced board backed by private equity with proper non-executives run in a sort of structured way and say, right, we've got a growth plan here. And effectively the private equity business can then see a roadmap with that growth plan to, in 7 years' time, we can exit our stake either by, relisting or whatever it might be, or by the sale to another private equity business, whatever it might be. But as long as the fans, the broad shareholder base kept control of the overall situations, there wasn't one dominant owner. They don't need a dominant owner because they're profitable.
Yeah.
So I think that they are in a unique situation. I think it's one of the most interesting business situations in world football right now.
Wow. And the thing is there is an equity firm that has quite a lot of capital invested in Celtic. This is different level stuff. Absolutely different level stuff. It's absolutely bonkers. It's called the Business of Sport podcast. I'm going to let you go into it. And he's going to talk about the money in the bank again. Do you know, let me just get to it.
Frustration against the Celtic board in the past. That is nothing compared to what is going to happen if Hearts beat them to win the league this year.
I was going to say, if in 1 year you don't qualify for the Champions League group stages and you don't win the SPL while sitting on 77 to 90 million in the bank plus 143 million, in revenue, it's going to be chaos.
Absolute chaos. If you bear in mind, Hearts' wage bill is 10 million. And Celtic's, which by the way is much less than it should be, is 30 million.
And Hearts' 24/5 accounts showed 24.4 million in revenue.
Right, so Hearts is basically the size of a large League One club in English terms, or a small Championship club. Yep. Celtic at 150 million is the size of a small Premier League club, even without any big TV revenue. So effectively, it's sort of the equivalent in terms of sporting surprise. Because the delta between the spending patterns, it is the equivalent of Leicester winning the Premier League.
Yeah.
That's the difference.
Talking about Hearts winning, not really bothered about that. And then he goes on to talk about Tory Bloom and stuff. I'm trying to get to it. And that's where he kind of ends up. It's absolutely crazy that someone, that's just looking and watching Celtic from afar. It's no wonder that Scottish football fans are up in arms at the way that Celtic can run. I mean, the Celtic fans are up in arms the way that we're run, because when you start to hear people like this, I mean, this is the type of guy that you respect. This is the type of guy that he knows his stuff. Do you know, it's not Celtic trust level stuff, and this is no disrespect to Celtic trust level people, but this is a guy that knows what it takes to run a club like Celtic. What a bloody hell of an interview that was. Unbelievable. I will put the link to that towards the end. But before we go any further, we need to talk about the Green Brigade, because it all follows into suit. And one of the best parts of the interview for me, the funnier part of it, I'll let you hear that, because it's where is it? It is. This is the best part of. This is the best part of the interview.
But effectively, really, for this century, for most of this century, Rangers has been a shit show.
I could play that bit all day long.
But effectively, really, for this century, for most of this century, Rangers has been a shit show.
Anyway, right, let's move on from that because that's took up a big chunk of the video this evening. Let's talk about the North Curve Celtic Twitter line this evening. Today, on March the 16th, 2012, the Green Brigade were violently kettled by police in a dramatic show of well, it was all about making sure that the Offensive Behaviour at Football Act was shown to be working. It was a controversial tactic at the time, and I was lucky that the bus I was on, that our bus was running late that day, because if it was on time, I would have been bang right in the middle of it with my two daughters. And this, for those who don't know, is what happened that day. Celtic, I've still got the t-shirt with that. I should have brought it out actually. My two daughters had the Band Boys Stand With Us with the handcuffs like that t-shirts. But the Celtic fans were trying to make their way to Celtic Park. They were stopped by police, and then it got quite apparent that the police weren't going to allow them to get anywhere near Celtic Park. People were kettled for the first time in Scottish football, where football fans subject to this type of over-exuberance and over-manning of a police force in Scotland. And it comes on a weekend, or a week, where Police Scotland have said that they do not have the resources that they had back then. Well, it's probably good for Celtic Football Club that they don't have the kind of resources that they had then. They were kettled for 5 hours, prevented for going to the game last year outside the Celtic Supporters Club down on London Road, where Celtic have just invested 20 million in the Barrowfield facility, and Celtic fans do still drink in that bar, I believe. And this again was stopping Celtic fans getting into a Rangers game, if you remember right. And they said that they weren't getting to walk towards the stadium. Now, this puts it into perspective here. They were told they weren't allowed to walk to the stadium because people had their faces covered. People took their face coverings off, and they still weren't allowed to go to the game. They were excluded from going into the Celtic Rangers game that day. The Rangers fans that day walked in with their faces covered and just walked straight into Celtic Park, and the rest to say is history. The Green Brigade have been pointing out a lot of the stuff that has been going on over the years. Even goes back to this article in one of the mainstream media, The Scotsman. Police have been at war with the Green Brigade since 2006, and there you go there. You can see what it said in the Scotsman article. Where and how does this stop with Celtic? Where, I mean, the board have come out and said that it's in the Green Brigade's hands. After listening to that interview, do you believe one iota? Is it not a case of, it seems to be that there's one excuse, there's one way of policing a certain fan base, and there's another way of policing Celtic fans. And it goes way back over the years, but how do we get over this? How do we get back to getting all the fans in? The board have said, look, the Green Brigade need to accept the terms and conditions of their season ticket. The Green Brigade haven't put out any statement until today via their North Curve Twitter account. The last thing they put out was the 7th of March with the Tiffle going into the Broomlawn stand. They haven't put out anything after the suspension approaching 30 game, banned for over 19 weeks now. A meeting with the Celtic Football Club. They had a meeting a week past Monday after the Rangers game, but they don't seem to be addressing that. There's one thing for sure. We're now going into the summer, and after this explosive interview yesterday, do you know, where they do speak about the fact that for the first time in 40 years that a club out with side Celtic or Rangers, and who do you believe in the whole situation that's going on at Celtic? You know, it's this guy has just opened their eyes. Not that Celtic fans needed their eyes opened, but when you hear this kind of stuff being spoken by professionals, by people that know how to run football clubs, and then you see the things that the Celtic board are saying to the fans, are the board fit for purpose? No, they're not. Do you know? And I kind of thought that this thing, I personally thought that the whole Celtic trust thing and this interview could not have came out at a better time for the Celtic football fan base, because Celtic board were winning. Celtic board were managed to quieten the Celtic fans collective. They had split the fan base, and they had made it look as if it was all the fans' fault. When you've got someone like this speaking.
European places.
And that's the key, isn't it? You mentioned revenue there. I mean, the reason they haven't been able to compete is because Celtic have been so dominant commercially. And you're looking at revenues last year, and it's also important to say Celtic is a public company.
It is very important. So because that forms part of the story that's about to come.
And we'll explain that. But just, from the financial perspective of getting a little bit of clarity around numbers, the numbers that have been released show Celtic last year generating 143.6 million in revenue. 33.9 million of that is profit after tax. They have a 77 million cash position in the bank.
Celtic, unusually for a football club, make a profit every year. Right, so so what they do is they make a profit of 5, 10, 15, 20 million, and then they stick it in the bank. So they've now got a cash balance, I believe, of around about 90 million pounds sat there in the bank. Just put their revenues in perspective, 150 odd million. Bearing in mind they don't get any English Premier League TV revenues. The TV revenues in Scotland are tiny.
So reported figures are about 4 million if you win.
Right.
The SPL. Do you remember when we were talking about rugby last week? That's about the same.
About the same as rugby.
So their total media deal is about 35 to 40 million a year for the league.
Charlie, what that tells you is that Celtic's native revenues, i.e. the ones that are not to do with TV revenue, are massive.
Yeah.
I mean, there are Premier League clubs that don't do a lot more revenue than that with the TV deal, with the Premier League TV deal. If Celtic had the EPL deal, and then if they had the additional commercial sponsorships that would come off the back of being in the EPL.
They'd be doing 300 million a year.
More, 350 million, 400 million a year. So they would be in that top echelon of English, absolute minimum. Yeah. Right? So Celtic is huge.
So he's basically saying if Celtic were to get into the English Premiership, they would be a top 6 club. Celtic fans have always known that. We've always known that. When you put it into perspective of the money that they get in England, the fact that Celtic, and the whole interview is absolutely bonkers. It is bonkers. And yeah, Jimmy did say that. Brian Wilson said the Green Brigade can get back into the stadium if they adhere to the same rules as the rest of the stadium for the rest of the season, and they would sit down and discuss it next year. Jim, it's delaying tactics. It's James, it is a new interview. It was published a day ago. So Jim says it's not an interview, but it was published on YouTube a day ago. So either this guy has it's been put out before, or it's anyway. This was put out, and it has to be because he's quote. It can't be a year old because he's quoting figures from this year. So I'll go with the fact that it was published a day ago, James. Anyway, the fact that he talks about, I mean, let's just get it to the money. The money section. Right, it is. It was recorded. Of course it was this year, because he talks about Hearts winning the league. Honestly. And I'll even prove he talks about Hearts winning the league. There we go. This bit here.
Make it a...
I'll just get this back up.
And the current state of the table is, I think they're 5 points clear.
63 points at time of recording for Hearts, 58 points for Celtic.
So that they are.
So that was recorded this week.
So they are 5 points clear of Celtic and 6 points clear of Rangers.
So that was recorded last week. So it just shows you it wasn't a year-old interview. It has been recorded in the last week. Got to say, the guy knows his stuff, and he's completely ripped Celtic to shreds. He does finish off the interview with this part here.
No harm in that. And that's great. And it might also enable some other owners to look at the league and think, well, do you know what? Actually, the entry price is lower. You can still compete. And you're playing at Parkhead and Ibrox every season twice, because we play each other home and away, home and away. So, we're playing there on a regular basis. It's something that might be done. Yes, I can see all that. But actually, oddly, the main beneficiary of Celtic not winning the league this season, I think, will be Celtic.
Interesting. He thinks the main beneficiary for Celtic not winning the league this year would be Celtic. And I think I can understand why he says that, because it then puts Celtic in a position where they have to then invest the cash. Anyway, Jesus. When the other club died, the Celtic board just sat instead of pushing the club forward. Yep. Yes, he is the ex-Sunderland director. And the guy speaking was talking straight from the future. Anyway, right. That's about it for this evening. You can't get much more explosive than that. Here is the link for, I'll put it up in the comment section just as we end this evening. I'll tell you one thing, the board are going to have a lot to answer to over the next couple of days. I think there is the link there. He has a point, don't like it, but it's well made. UEFA and the SFA surely rule the TV money. Get the guy on the board. He has a point, I don't like it, but it's well made. He's got a fantastic point, considering he rips the Celtic board to shreds in the running of the club. Anyway, that's me done and dusted for this evening. I shall see you all in the morning. Yep, Jim, I've just put a link to it in the comments, so you can go and watch it to your heart's content, and then tell me what you think about it in the morning. On that note, have a fantastic evening, Celtic fans, wherever you are, all around the world.